prossimo relatore è già Sharma, che è il capo del cargo casualty da Clyde ed è sostanzialmente uno degli avvocati più skilled, più esperti nell'ambito delle collisioni e degli incendi, esplosioni e salvataggi, insomma tutti i sinistri marittimi in cui i carichi sono coinvolti. Ha partecipato a numerosissimi casi anche che sono stati pubblicati sul Lloyd's Report, e lascio la parola a lui perché il tempo purtroppo è molto stretto.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this will be a very quick race through the position of cargo. It's fortunate that we're time limited, because the problem with cargo is we know nothing about what happened. So we'll take a quick look at the position of cargo interests in a collision and consequences for cargo. Typically there will very often be claims for salvage, for general average. There may well be PA damage and cargo insurance policy claims, and of course then there will be recovery. Sometimes there will be a lot of practical issues that cargo face aside from the claims. Quite often the voyage will be terminated, and so the first fundamental decision that cargo will have to make is to decide whether to sell the cargo as is where is, or on carry it. And sometimes the decision is not only whether we should on carry the cargo or not. Sometimes the exposure to claims against the cargo can be so high that the dilemma is whether you want to walk away from the cargo or not. So to look at an example, this is a collision, the Hyung Ah Dragon, which collided with the Elaine off Vietnam in last November. So the Hyung Ah Dragon, a small container ship, 666 containers on board, and we represent most or the majority of those, was coming into port in Vietnam, and the Elaine was leaving in ballast. As you will have seen in the previous pictures, the Hyung Ah Dragon partly sank, 2 holes were breached, and all of the below deck spaces were flooded. This is a picture of the Elaine. It's not very damaged at all. You can see a close-up here, damage to the bow. So clearly vessel and cargo needed some outside assistance, so they signed Lloyd's Open Form with salvors, and Scopic was incorporated and invoked. Also the ship owners declared general average, and GA adjusters were appointed. All of the cargo below deck is flooded and really not of much value. Then the salvors had quite a lot of difficulty with the local authorities who were interfering with the salvage operation. And to add insult to injury, a fire broke out on deck amongst some of the cargo. Also, quite a few local people were boarding the vessel and taking cargo. One of our clients had around $600,000 of bronze, in 4 containers under deck, and when the vessel was eventually refloated, there was 0 left. So that was a bit of a hassle. The salvors removed about 50 containers under Lloyd's Open Form and removed the oil from the casualty. Then I think Scopic was terminated by the P&I Club. And without the support of the P&I Club to pay Scopic, it wasn't financially viable for the salvors to continue with the salvage operation, so they terminated the salvage contract. And subsequently, the P&I Club entered into a wreck removal contract. So, in this case, the security demand against cargo was very, very high. So the salvage security demanded from cargo interests was 75% of the cargo value. And on top of that, there was a requirement for general average security, which was estimated at 22%. So you can see there's a mere 3% of the value that isn't accounted for when you tot up the security. So there's a dilemma here for cargo interests. Do you provide security effectively for the total value of the cargo? And then you have potential PA claims under the policy as well, which can cause a bit of a practical difficulty. And the reason for that is you have a possibility. Can you hear me at the back? All right, good. You have a possibility for a dispute overvalues in the claims. So if you look, take an example where the cargo is partly damaged and suffering some progressive deterioration. The salvors will claim salvage based on the value at the time that the salvage services terminate. And the value for GA purposes will be the value of the cargo at the end of the voyage, which might well be a significantly later time. And then, in terms of the insured, he's usually covered a warehouse to warehouse. So he will get the cargo at his warehouse in his destination, and then he'll look at the cargo and say to his insurer, well, it's very damaged, so I would like a total loss, please. But if you go back in time, the salvors will want to be paid based on the value of the cargo at the time they finish their work, and the GA claim may well be based on the value, or will be based on the value at the end of that voyage. So you can find that the cargo underwriter is squeezed here. And this potential dispute we've seen in a number of cases has resulted in exposure for the cargo insurer in excess of the actual value of the cargo because of this potential dispute in values. And you might say that, well, in general average there is an implied cap of 100% of the cargo value, and this will include any amounts that are paid in salvage. But the problem with this is that the GA contribution will be plus interest, and the GA is 7% interest per year, and I think many of us will have waited for container ship adjustments to be issued 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years after the casualty. So the interest is a huge factor. So there's a temptation in cases like this for cargo insurers to pay a total loss and not provide security. But it's not quite so simple, because cargo is still a party to the Lloyd's Open Form salvage contract, and it is possible still for the salvors to obtain an arbitration award directly against the cargo owners and enforce it directly against the cargo owners. Of course, it will depend who the cargo owner is. If it's a one-man business in Vietnam, they probably won't bother, but if it's Fiat, for example, yes, they will. And then, again, even if you haven't provided security, the cargo owners may well face a claim for GA anyway. And if there is a liability for these two aspects, the cargo owners will typically seek an indemnity under their cargo policy from their cargo insurers. So these kind of cases can be quite tricky and require some careful management to ensure the exposure to pay salvage and GA and the policy claim is controlled and the values are agreed for all of those aspects. So in this case, the solution was to try and negotiate an agreement with salvors at a percentage of the arrived value of the cargo, and the owners and the P&I agreed to drop their general average claim, and a few cargoes were sold as is where is. So those are some practical problems. We'll take a very quick look at some other aspects that affect cargo. So causation, of course, we want to investigate the cause. You've heard in some detail about the steps that can be taken to investigate. From a cargo perspective, there's a basic inequality because we just weren't there. At least if you represent one of the ships, you have one side of the story. And the ships, unsurprisingly, are not very willing to give us much evidence. Sometimes you find that the ships will agree a division of liability, but they won't even tell cargo. However, as has been mentioned earlier, the internet can quite often give you some quite nice information, and we'll test this link if it works. Okay. This is only 1 minute long, I think. It's coming. Okay, so this is a collision between the Tuan Mai and the Bex Halil. You can just see the end of it here. We represent the cargo on this small vessel, the Tuan Mai. I have no clue what they're saying, by the way, if anyone can translate that. Okay, and if you looked really carefully in the corner of that picture, there was someone from one of my colleagues here rushing out to serve proceedings on one of the ships to found jurisdiction already. Thank you. And then, yeah, you can see this. There's also been quite a few AIS tracks. You can see here a collision towards the end of last year, Hange in Italy and Algarofar. You can see the Algarofar basically making a dramatic turn and hitting the Hange in Italy right, just like that. And with this kind of information, it's very helpful for cargo. We settled our cargo claims on this case for more than 90% within 3 months or so of collision. Thank you. So cargo will consider, whether there are any steps that you can take to force provision of evidence at an early stage, and the options might vary depending on the jurisdiction involved. We've already heard quite a lot more about this, so you've got flag state inquiries, maybe a local inquiry, possibility of court surveys, things like that. In terms of the recovery, our losses are typically going to be PA and GA indemnity and salvage indemnity claims. And the claims against the carriers are usually contractual claims, and inevitably the carriers will say, oh, Hague or Hague-Bisbee rules will apply and give me an error of navigation defence. So clearly it's quite rare, but we are quite enthusiastic about finding claims where the Hamburg rules might apply. There's no error of navigation defence there. We want to investigate to see whether there's any causative unseaworthiness arising from a failure to exercise due diligence to make the vessel seaworthy. And also we do consider whether you may bring some claims against NVOCCs. This can create quite a lot of administration on some of these container ship casualties. There can be many, many contractual carriers on the MOL Comfort. There are more than 150 different contractual carriers. But the benefit of that is that we believe anyway that NVOCCs cannot claim the protection of global limitation under 76 or 96 limitation conventions, so it may be a way you can avoid the impact of global limitation. So we've heard about investigation. Jurisdiction is also key for cargo, and there will be various options which have been described before, but the choice is very often just driven by limitation and a different limitation convention that would apply. A brief but noteworthy mention from US law, that has not signed any of the typical limitation conventions, so it will base limitation on the value of the vessel at the end of the voyage. And also you may get the benefit as cargo interests of innocent cargo rule. This is a fantastic rule. It means that in practice cargo can recover 100% of its loss from the colliding vessel, even if the colliding vessel was only 1% to blame. So for example, we tried this in a case, or I tried this in a case called the New Flame, and that was another jurisdiction race which ended up in fact in a settlement, which is quite favourable. So just to complete the US story, to try and stop or discourage cargo from claiming the benefit of this innocent cargo rule, the bills of lading will have typically both a blame collision clause provision. The intention is to put you back in the position you would have been without this extra benefit, but that clause is not always enforceable. Then, very quickly, I think because we're short of time, I'll just summarise. Security clearly is essential for us, and you will have to look at the provision of security on an urgent basis to ensure you do recover your loss. 12 seconds now. There's a summary, that's a complex interaction of factors involving salvage and GA and PA claims might affect what you practically do with your cargo. You should take early steps as cargo to obtain some evidence on the collision liability. It's essential to get security, as we know, and it's important to have an integrated approach to ensure all of these factors are considered to obtain the best outcome. And the moral of the story is that cargo is innocent, but shouldn't remain a bystander. Okay, and that's